Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let's give the people what they want. Professional wrestling.
With Mike McGuire.
The happiest Canadian camper in the world.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Give me a hell yeah.
We are on the road this week from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Hello, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. We're hot off the heels of AEW's Full Gear. We have some new champions to talk about. We have some retaining champions to talk about. And the question, where's the belt? Where is the AEW championship? That's another question for another day, I guess. But we will talk all about Full Gear, including some of your feedback coming up, plus a very special guest on the show today, a guy who I've actually been in contact with for a couple years and really gotten to know through his work. We finally got to sit down and have a face-to-face by way of Zoom, and I think you'll find the conversation kind of interesting, especially if you're a fan of championship title belts. Man's name, Dan Van Alst. He's better known as Belt Fan Dan or Belts by Dan. You've seen a lot of his work in AEW, in New Japan Pro Wrestling, even for some WWE projects, and a lot more out there. We'll talk about some of the belts that he has personally made, how the concepts come together, and also something that I was really looking forward to talking to him about because it is the holiday season, because there are a lot of, we'll say, shady sellers when it comes to championship belts, and especially replicas, or even claiming to have legitimate copies out there, or even getting legitimate belts made. We're going to talk about the belt buying world, and even if you're someone looking for one as a gift or looking to get someone a gift of a championship belt, some of the things to look out for. But a really, really fascinating conversation with Dan Van Alst today. I love talking to this guy, and see, I'm a belt guy. If you've seen the clips of my studio office, you can tell I've got replicas, I've got some cool, legit things, but I mean, it pales in comparison to what this guy has. But more importantly, he has the experience, he has the knowledge. So that's coming up. Also, looking forward to talking to Dave Meltzer this morning. He is back after a bit of a run around. He had some trips and stuff to do. And, of course, he had to recover from the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. Those names came out, and a lot of question marks around some of them. I know some people question how some of the scoring is done, but maybe we'll touch on that a bit. We've talked about it in the past with Dave, so you can go back to even last year this time in the podcast feed and find out how exactly everything is calibrated and done. But speaking of which, this show, always free, always about pro wrestling. All our shows are always free. We're not hiding behind paywalls. We don't rely on you financially. Although, if you do want to leave a tip, because some people have said, hey, we love what you're doing. Here's 20, here's 50, whatever. They do send it through the PayPal at McGuireShow.com. That gets divvied up among the crew. Speaking of which, we are working on another edition of a holiday hullabaloo this year for the festive season, if you would, for the Christmas season, and some special guests going to be joining us for that as well. So again, if you want to support the show any way you can, McGuireShow.com, but most importantly, you just being here, having us on your automatic downloads, having us on your subscription, that means the most to us, on top of leaving a 5-star review and leaving some comments in the review. Greatly appreciated as well, because that actually, it's the currency of this medium these days. Whether you're listening on the radio or you're listening through the podcast, it's more and more actual interaction with listeners, with fans. That's why we love having the Facebook group, Team MOW, McGuire on Wrestling. New members coming in every week, which is nice to see again. Welcome aboard. Love having you in. And it's a really fun, positive place to have discourse as well. We don't put up with a lot of crap. We don't let people pick fights. In fact, I'm not afraid to come down and say, look, we don't do that here. And once I explain that, usually people are pretty cool about it. But it's a fun group. Hopefully you can join us, McGuire on Wrestling on Facebook. Now, coming up this week, like I said, we got Dan Van Alst, we've got Dave Meltzer, and also Joe Aguinaldo going to be jumping in to join me for a little bit of yay boo. So I thought rather than going through the entire 5 count this week with the headlines, we would just talk about some of the big things going on, you and I here right now. One of the biggest, of course, happened this past Friday night on WWE SmackDown as the men's War Games main event has been lined up. Actually, there was a big news in the women's one too, but of course, a big return in the way of the men's side of things, and a surprise member joining the original bloodline.
It's going to be 5 versus 5.
I like how this all came together. CM Punk getting to the ring, taping up his fists, taking on the new bloodline, knocking them all out of the ring, and then him and Roman having that moment, having that face-off.
Here we go! CM Punk, number 5 for the original bloodline! Paul Heyman has pulled off a coup! The wise man came through when the OTC needed him most! CM Punk!
And Roman, you could see mouthing to Punk, "I don't like you." And Punk said, "You don't have to. It's not about you and me. It's about him," pointing to Paul Heyman, who, of course, this was his first time back on TV since going through that table at Madison Square Garden, courtesy of the new bloodline. So, an interesting choice, an interesting way to go. Some people were saying, it could be Brock Lesnar. And I'm guessing if Brock wasn't involved in all the legal stuff in that lawsuit being mentioned there, that it probably could have been Brock Lesnar. Same time, Brock Lesnar in a War Games match, I don't know. How do you do that convincingly without just having it be 5-on-1 then? Just having Brock tear through everybody. I think that for a guy the level of Brock Lesnar, taking on even 5 new bloodline guys wouldn't be that convincing. So I like this. I like that it has Seth Rollins now looking like a bit of a fink for not wanting to help out, because that can reignite the flames between CM Punk and Seth Rollins down the line. And we'll see what happens here. But tons and tons of interesting things coming out of this. And, of course, that's next weekend in Vancouver. My co-host from my morning radio show, Justin, he is actually headed out to Vancouver for Survivor Series. I was going to go, but honestly, I'm still just enjoying kind of settling into my new place and having things, not cost as much money right now. So I decided to sit this one out. I mean, I've been pretty blessed when it goes to pay-per-views. I was there for the Hell in a Cell with Cody. If you remember, I broke that story. I've been to WrestleManias with some great moments. Was it the Backlash where Randy Orton and Mick Foley had their amazing match? Yeah, so I'm good. I'm sure I'm going to miss something spectacular at this one, though, and we'll find out. Also, before we get going, I want to do a quick correction on last week's show. For some reason, and I don't know why this entered my brain, but for some reason I said that Jinder Mahal had beaten AJ Styles to win the WWE Championship. No, they had that massive feud after Jinder won the championship. Of course, Jinder defeating Randy Orton. That was the match where the Singh brothers got thrown through the table and Randy made that wincy face, like, when he knew he kind of overthrew a bit. But anyway, that was something that completely just was a brain fart, and I wanted to make sure I address it because, some people will just be happy making a mistake and not acknowledging it. And that's not what I do. It's not what we do here. Also, talking about things in pro wrestling, of course, New Japan Pro Wrestling is where Kenny Omega is looking to make his official return, and it's looking like Wrestle Dynasty is going to be where that match between him and Gabe Kidd takes place. But it's interesting to see one of AEW's biggest stars doing what he can to do a first-of-its-kind show in Japan, which is going to be a co-brand between AEW and New Japan. So sometimes we kind of get up in the air about AEW not booking in advance, not thinking ahead far enough. And maybe this is New Japan's influence a bit. So we're seeing something build on the other side of the pond. What I find very interesting, though, is that it has not really been acknowledged on AEW TV at all yet. At least not the stuff that I've seen. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we get closer and closer to that. Now, maybe that Full Gear is wrapped up. Maybe we'll start getting more details about that. And speaking of Full Gear, of course, the big show last night, I finished watching it early this morning because of the event I was at last night. And so I watched the whole thing this morning. Interesting show, interesting crowd. A lot of people are talking about the crowds in AEW. I would love your thoughts as well. Can comment at McGuire Show or on the Team MOW McGuire on Wrestling Facebook page. The AEW fans, I don't know if they're there to watch or if they're there to be impressed. And there is a big difference. There's a big difference. I can go to any show watch and enjoy it, or I can go to a show with a bit of a chip on my shoulder saying, okay, you know what? You really got to bring it all out. And I posted this comment this morning as I was producing the show on the Facebook page. Were the Costco guys really one of the most over acts in the building that night? If you go by crowd response, yeah, they were. They were. I mean, you look at Big Boom AJ there, and I didn't realize how over these guys were. Maybe it's just a Newark thing. I don't know. But they legit were giving him tons of love for simple moves. The "you still got it" after, what was it, a fireman's carry press, or I can't remember. He took QT over the show, and this big "you still got it" started going on. I was like, okay. But there was a ton of great action. Were the fans on top of everything? No. And we've talked about this on different shows on AEW TV crowds, how the fans are almost going in there. It's like, give me something. And the funny thing is, they're getting something. They're getting some great matches. They're getting some great effort. But I just don't know. I don't know what it is. I think maybe, to quote Bryan Danielson, maybe they're just too fickle. But then again, I like liking things. We like liking things on this show. So we're going to go through some of the highlights. Konosuke Takeshita. This guy is just a star. This is just a star. And I think he really stole the show in that match against Ricochet. But we'll get your feedback coming up on that and a bunch more as well. So stick around. We've got a lot to talk about today. We're talking title belts, we're talking pay-per-view, and we're talking to the one and only Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer next. Thanks for being here.
If you're here, you're a part of Team MOW. Join us on Facebook at Team MOW McGuire on Wrestling and get in on the conversation. This is McGuire on Wrestling.
From WrestleMania to SummerSlam to Halloween Havoc to Starrcade, wrestling had its golden era from the 80s through to the mid-2000s. Legends and Champions is where we open the vault. Legends and Champions comes to you as part of the McGuire on Wrestling Network each and every week. Get your midweek fix. You can get it from all good podcast providers just by searching for McGuire on Wrestling. Why wouldn't you? See you there.
It's time for the Wrestling Observer Insider with Dave Meltzer, McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, Dave, I have to start this show off by saying I'm very jealous. You're in your tie-dye right now. You're in sunny California. I don't care if it's pouring rain. You're not in about 1.5 feet of snow in Edmonton, Alberta with me right now. So
I'm not in snow, and I just got back from Maui, so yeah.
Oh, well, just rub it in a little more, why don't you? That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, great to have you back here. And did you get a chance to sit down through Full Gear last night?
In what sense? I mean, I watched the whole show, of course. Yeah.
Okay, well, I figured you did, but I don't know. Sometimes people watch a little later, and you got other things you're tracking all the time. So I just wanted to see how your time went.
Pay-per-view is usually pretty much a priority. I'm going to watch that the day of the show, yeah.
Overall, we've got our Yay Boo segment coming up with some fan feedback. But your thoughts, if you were to give a 30,000-foot view at the show.
I mean, I thought that the matches themselves were almost all very good, many excellent. Mm-hmm. I thought too many heels going over, not enough baby faces shining. I mean, that would definitely be my thing at the end. I just felt that the weakness of the promotion is lack of over baby faces, and I think this show did nothing to change that. So I think that's the problem. They're really, I mean, they give you good matches, but so many of them are heels dominate, which is fine. Babyface gets a comeback, which is fine, and then heel wins clean at the end, which is fine in some matches. I think that's fine to do, but overall on the show, I think that you always want more babyfaces up than heels up. I think that's just better for long-term business. I know with WWE, it's like, when they do a house show, unless it's like a much bigger star, the general rule is you put the babyface over. A much bigger star or a championship is at stake. Right. And I think Tony likes to have heel champions, but he's still got so many titles that he probably should have more of a split with many more babyface champions. I mean, if you look at the thing, I mean, I guess Garcia won, but most of the champions and Private Party in the tag team division, but so many of the champions are heels. And I think that at the end of the show, it's like, okay, who do I want to see? Who's the kick-ass guy that Jon Moxley's being set up for? And I don't have the answer. Who's the guy who's going to beat Takeshita? I don't have the answer. Who's the guy who's going to beat Okada? I don't have the answer because I don't have any baby faces that I go, they're going to get this guy at the end. And to me, that's what wrestling's always been about. It's like if you have a heel champion, you need super strong baby faces as chasers, or else you really don't have anything. So to me, that's like the biggest flaw in the promotion right now.
After all the contract hullabaloo at the end of the title match last night, do you see any possibility where Christian Cage could actually be flipping back to babyface? I don't know how he could do it because he's been such a monster heel, but I mean, anything's possible, right? And people did react when he came out.
Christian Cage to me, he's not the guy. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, if he turns babyface, that's fine. You know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. He's a great performer. But he's not the guy. You need the guy. That's what they're lacking, is the guy that everyone gets behind, and the guy who basically carries the promotion on the babyface side. Closest they have were Swerve and Ospreay, and both of them got beat clean. I understood in each case the reason why. You know, they wanted to get Lashley over. They wanted to get Fletcher over. But still, you know, I think that Ospreay's more valuable than Fletcher.
Oh, absolutely.
And Swerve is your guy. I guess with Lashley, I expected him to win, and I think he should have won. I just think there should have been a lot more interference. I mean, this was basically a spear through a barricade and a hurt lock, and then he's out. That was pretty clean. I mean, it didn't come across like, man, I can't wait for the rematch because of all the controversy. And I think that they did that in both of those matches. I mean, they were so strong on getting Bobby Lashley and Fletcher over, which is fine. But you know, Moxley needs challengers. I don't know what they're doing next. Like I should be, when that pay-per-view is over, I should be able to say, I know where this is going because this happened, this happened, this happened. And it looks like, I think people are talking like maybe it's a four-way with, for the next pay-per-view with Moxley, Christian, Jay White, and Adam Page. And it's a match. You know, it's not like somebody's been built up for months and months and months.
Yeah, is Jay White the babyface in that, I guess? Like, he's the only one that would be, too, right?
Yeah, he's the only babyface, and he's not really over. He's not really over big as a babyface. He's a great wrestler, but he's not super over. You know, I mean, so that's the thing. You know, and they need to get babyfaces over, and also listen to the crowd on who the babyfaces are. Even like with the TV last week on Wednesday, like Darby's very over, and I know some people think he could be the guy. I'm not sold on him being the A1 guy, but he is one of the top guys. And Claudio just beat him clean too. So it's like you just keep beating the baby faces. People are going to lose faith in the baby faces. You know, if a guy's super over like Jey Uso, you know, it's or Roman Reigns or something like that, you know, you can beat him. But I mean, even look at Cody Rhodes. How many times has Cody Rhodes lost since he's been in the promotion? I mean, 2 or 3, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you can count on one hand.
Yeah. I mean, there's a Drew McIntyre TV match and the Roman Reigns match at Mania, which had a million screw jobs, and the other one had a screw job, you know, was screw job too. So it's like the top baby face is protected. Cena like would lose at times, but there was always an excuse, and he was never downgraded until the day that he was no longer a top baby face, you know, and then he could lose, you know, because, you know, he wasn't there at the top. When Roman Reigns was being pushed as the top baby face, you know, he was protected. I mean, it didn't quite work, but that was the idea. And they need the
formula. Yeah.
Yeah. They need that guy. And that's what, you know, that's what they're lacking. I mean, business-wise, they're in great financial shape. I mean, more than almost any company, but popularity-wise, they're struggling. And I've learned enough to know that one great pay-per-view doesn't make a turnaround. But this one, when it was over, it was kind of like, not only do I not think it's not going to be a turnaround, but it's like, I don't even know where you go next. And that's scary to me when I can't figure out where you go next. That's not a good thing.
Well, last pay-per-view, they ended on such a downer with Wrestle Dream, with Bryan Danielson and everything else. I mean, They had to do something to pick people up. We talked about this before you went on your vacation. I had asked you then about Orange Cassidy being the main event, and your response to me was basically, well, they need a guy. You know, like we need an opponent. We need a babyface, and Cassidy was the best one we had here. I have my thoughts on this match that I'm going to save for our Yay Boo segment here, but I wanted your thoughts on how that folded out, and was it just a case of, you know, we needed a guy again? Because that's kind of how it came off to me.
Yeah. I mean, it felt to me it was all about Moxley, and Cassidy was the opponent, and it went exactly like I expected, which is fine, but they don't have that opponent. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's like just looking at wins and losses. If you're trying to make wins and losses mean something, the guy Kyle Fletcher and Bobby Lashley should be going for the championship. They just got giant wins.
Yes.
And they're both heels, and there's absolutely nothing that makes me think when that show is over that either of those guys is going to even be in the championship mix. And to me, it's like if you beat a Will Ospreay or you beat a Swerve, the only reason to beat those guys to me is to set up a world championship match with the winner. Then that loss means something. If it's just a loss to get somebody over, it's like you're sacrificing your most over guys. I don't know. I mean, I suppose Ospreay's going to beat Fletcher back later, and Swerve will beat Lashley later, and probably will happen. But right now they need the super over baby faces more than they need more heels over. They got so many heels that they keep putting over.
We're talking to Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer and WrestlingObserver.com here. Dave, do you think that maybe part of this problem is because they're trying to fill a massive pay-per-view card? Like, we've seen WWE scale back on the matches, so we almost have question marks as to who's going to end up in what storyline and who's going to be vying for certain things. And like you said here, it seems like everybody has their own rivalries going on. That's fine. It's a lot of matches. That's fine. But does this hurt the need for baby faces by having the available ones in these somewhat nothing matches?
I mean, you only need to protect a couple, but they're not protecting anyone. That's the difference.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like so many matches, but just Tony's philosophy on booking, and he's going to book the way he's going to book. He's very into heels getting heat over and over and over again. That's the TV to build the pay-per-view is always the heels getting heat on the babyface. And, you have to know sometimes that's the right thing to do. Often it's the right thing to do, but it needs more of a balance. Again, I just think that they need stronger baby faces because that's the weakness of the promotion. And
you need a payoff. You need the baby face to eventually get over.
Yeah. And then you need that guy chasing. The key is the chase and eventually the capture. But I don't feel the chase. I mean, who's chasing? I think that's where they're really falling short right now.
I said this after watching the show this morning. I was hosting an event here in Edmonton last night, so I got up super early this morning to watch the show. And I watched the 0 Hour as well, which I'll be honest, I don't always watch. But after all the hullabaloo that came out of this thing, were the Costco guys some of the most over people at that show last night?
Yeah, they were super over. I mean, it worked. It worked, and it was on 0 Hour. It didn't affect the pay-per-view. I almost think some fans would be unhappy if it was on pay-per-view. But at the same time, it's like the one negative that I saw was that some people were telling me, like, look at how many views this is in the middle of the pay-per-view show. Somebody brought up, goes like, how many people watched this AJ and QT match on social media since it happened? Mm-hmm. And it's just like, that's great in a bubble, but it's like the last thing I want as the pay-per-view is going on is people watching one of my matches on YouTube and not watching my pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. You're competing against yourself. And I think that if millions or whatever the real number is, people are throwing out like these crazy numbers. And I mean, between every single thing, I mean, these numbers are pretty crazy, but the key is that everyone who watched on social media that match that didn't watch it live, and the live viewership was not super high, but like heard about it somewhere else, they are not watching your pay-per-view. They're watching something else. So it's like, it's almost counterproductive to selling your pay-per-view. And I mean, they did a great job. They helped Tony Khan get a lot of media. They got a good live crowd. A lot of people came for that match, obviously. So it was that match was a big success.
Well, the guy, and I explained this to somebody, the guy is a New Jersey, area known indie wrestler. So it's like when you go to any of these dark match shows sometimes. Well,
he's not really, I mean, he hasn't been a New Jersey indie wrestler for over 20 years.
But that's what I mean, though. But some people did remember him, and then when you get the hype of, it's a Jersey guy, and he's getting to be on the show.
He became for this show, he became a famous celebrity. One of those celebrities that. I mean, it was great to have him on the show. It was great to promote the show. It worked with the crowd. More than most of the matches did. At the so that's fine. It wasn't a beautiful match or anything.
No,
like that.
God no. But it was fun. It was admittedly fun. Yeah. Okay. With that, our guys over at the alternate commentary table, I noticed it myself when I watch AEW TV, and we've talked about this a little bit now already, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that because we haven't had a chance to talk about it. The crowd response and the reactions at AEW shows. Now, some people are saying, oh, well, maybe they're just not mic'd right. I doubt that because of the volume of the crowd when those Costco guys came out versus
and in the
rest of the pay-per-view. Yeah, and in the Ospreay match. And that was the other one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Ospreay match, they were going crazy. No. Yeah. It was a tough crowd. It was a really tough crowd. Mm-hmm. And they've had tough, the one thing AEW used to not have was tough crowds. Yep. And that's the whole perception issue. That's a big problem right now because a lot of the crowds have been tough. So even when you're out there, like I'll give you examples, like I was watching the Ricochet and Takeshita match.
Yes.
And one of my friends who did not watch the show live, which amazed me only because he's someone who you would think would have watched it live. Sure. He goes, how was Ricochet and Takeshita? And I said, if we were at PWG and saw this match, we would be going crazy and everyone in the building would be going crazy. Mm-hmm. It's quiet. They've just decided that they're not into this match. And no matter what these guys do, they hit super hard. They do all the moves. They build a match, the whole thing. It's just like they were not interested. And this is like Ricochet, who's only been there for a little while, and Takeshita, who's a fantastic wrestler, probably the second best wrestler in the company. So it's become very difficult. Yeah, especially when you have a long show. I mean, look, it's still a really good show, but there's like the flaws. You can't overlook those flaws, and you got to figure out how to rectify them, because if you keep going, the direction is more negative than positive as far as business growth goes, or as far as fan business growth goes. I mean, obviously business growth, they're actually, it's all a great positive, and they're going on max, in a little over a month.
Yeah, the money's there.
The money's there, but they're having trouble selling tickets. As bad as that is, the people who go are not thrilled about it. They just kind of like going, well, we're wrestling fans, we're going to go, but this product's not over. And when that's a real tough thing. And also, here's the other thing too, is for months, they built the whole company around Bryan Danielson. Then he lost. Yes. You're going to have a fallback unless you had a guy sitting there ready, which Ospreay was and Swerve was, to take over, but they didn't take over. So now, you don't have the guy you built around who's guaranteed great match every time out. And you don't have his replacement, even though Swerve and Ospreay, either one of them could have been.
The money is there. The interest, maybe not so much for AEW. You're listening to McGuire on Wrestling with our friend Dave Meltzer, who joins us every week. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Survivor Series and touch back on the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. Stand by.
Thanks for listening to McGuire on Wrestling. To be a part of the show, follow our social media or leave a tip. Head to McGuireShow.com. This is McGuire on Wrestling.
Hey, yo, how many of you here came to listen to your same generic wrestling podcast? Or how many of you came to listen to the alternate commentary table every single Saturday?
You're going to get our perspective of what the real fans of wrestling think, and no one does it like us.
Subscribe and stream to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed anywhere where you're streaming your podcasts. Survey says one more for the Greek guys.
Chair shot.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
We're back with Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer. We just talked a little bit about AEW's Full Gear. We're going to get some of your thoughts with our Yay Boo segment coming up. Dave, we have WWE's Survivor Series on deck for us next. It's pretty obvious now, I guess, that it was the plan all along to bring in a Heyman guy to be the fifth person in the Bloodline versus New Bloodline War Games match here. CM Punk being that guy. Do you know if the plan was always to be Punk, or was there any possibility, and I'm guessing not because his name is still mentioned in this legal mumbo-jumbo going on with Vince McMahon, but was there ever any possibility that this would have been Brock Lesnar?
I actually think that would have been the best choice of all if there was no legal issue, but there is. So Punk is the next best choice. Yeah, Brock Lesnar teaming with Roman Reigns, being on that team would have been real, especially since he's been gone for so long, would have been real big. But Punk is real big too. So I thought when they did that was like a pretty big, strong move. And, again, a lot of interest that I've seen when I was watching the build. I mean, if you're watching the build storyline wise, you go, it's going to be Seth. You know what I mean? But
every line was pointing there as soon as they added Bronson Reed, right?
Right. Yeah, especially with Bronson Reed and Seth having the feud and everything. Yeah, if you think it's going to be Seth. And I mean, it's funny because people are going like, oh, like they did it with no story. And it's sort of like, well, Paul with Impact and Punk is the story. But yeah, by traditional story, it would be Seth. But, the thing you got to remember in WWE and in wrestling in general is like it's money, not story. And in this match, who do I think will mean the most money-wise to the match, Punk or Seth? And my answer is Punk. So therefore, I think they did the right thing, even though they led you and the whole angle, everything was built for Seth. They got a lot of real good ways to go. I look at 2025 and I can see all kinds of big matches in 2025. Yeah.
I mentioned earlier in the show that this lines up perfectly for Punk to say to Rollins, well, I stepped up and you didn't. Mm-hmm. This could set up that feud. There's interaction with Roman Reigns that's possible. There's all sorts of lines, right?
Long term, Punk and Roman Reigns was when Punk came back was absolutely on the docket, because I remember being told. I mean, I asked and I go, how Punk and Roman Reigns was like a long way away, but absolutely was going to happen. So when that is, if it's next year or the year after or whatever, I mean, it's still something, and this can plant the seeds for that too.
As for the business of Survivor Series, I checked WrestleTix, and there's still a lot of floor seats, still a lot of high-end tickets, and then a lot of resale. I mean, the resales we can't count as general interest because people will buy seats, and then they'll get better ones, and yada, yada, yada. But the fact that there's still a lot of first-run seats available for this, do you think that might have been part of the play as well, to have Punk come in to maybe try and get those last seats sold?
No, because I think that this was like the plan all along, and I don't think they're really worried about that type of a thing. But I was surprised because Vancouver is such a strong market that, some of it's that they price so high. Mm-hmm. But I thought Vancouver was going to be first day sellout. And here we are, a week away, and I don't know what the number is. The last I looked, it was 2,000 unsold tickets.
As we're recording, it's about 1,700 available right now. So
yeah, so that's more than I would have expected. But they also, the whole way of measuring tickets is also different, because what they do now, before it was like, this is the ticket prices and people buy or they don't buy. Now it's like, we're going to have these freaking monster, super high ticket prices. And whoever the crazies are that want those tickets and get the best seats first, they'll buy it. And then the last week, what we'll do is we'll drop it to try to fill the building.
Right.
AEW is doing that to a degree, but, UFC and WWE more and more. And WWE is going to be, I saw like at the last investors call, I mean, they basically, Mark Shapiro and Ari, who are running the company, are basically, because of the success of UFC, they're going like, we're underpricing WWE. Now, wrestling fans would say different, but we're underpricing it. But the idea is that, at the end, we'll drop the prices for those empty seats and people will buy them because the prices are low. But we want the biggest, they're into the biggest gate possible. The Toronto pay-per-view, when they go, when they go to the stadium, will be the biggest ever in Canada. But this one will be, it'll certainly be like number 2 or 3 of all time, maybe number 1 of all time, because they did come in with high prices.
Yeah, well, economically, the two provinces are very different. I mean, for those that don't know the layout, they're literally different ends of the country here. Vancouver, I will say, is one of the hardest economies to live in as a middle-income person. It's a lot of people that either live in the surrounding communities, that sort of area. And even then, there's been a lot of talk. They just had a provincial election there. There's been a lot of talk about people just struggling to get by right now. So I'm not sure if that's so much the issue compared to, like you said, the high ticket prices, but it is a very, very different market. And it did surprise me too. I thought, 1-2 day sellout at the most here because just of the amount of people that are there. My morning show co-host for my radio show, he's flying out to Vancouver for it. I was going to join him. And then I kind of just shifted my priorities. I was like, why don't you give me the story about it and we'll do it that way. But for me, kind of, it was the same thing. Ticket prices were part of that. I mean, I could try and get the credentials thing. I just don't care. You know what I mean? I'd rather go to a show just as a show guy, and just be a fan. Yeah. To make the trip to Vancouver, to find a place to stay. They got Taylor Swift coming the next week, so that thank God we missed those hotel prices. But overall, it's just a very different, very, very different. And honestly, that may be where a lot of the family ticket money went, was to those Taylor Swift shows that are coming. So yeah, it's hard to say, but either way, Survivor Series shaping up to be very interesting. Dave, we're running low on time here, so while I got you, I promised some folks we would touch on it. We didn't get to before you went on vacation, But the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame has come out. Big winners and a couple surprising names, either getting off the ballot or really still not there yet. What was the biggest winner for you?
I know my biggest winner, but I think like the key guys who I thought needed to get in, which were probably Reigns and Bobby Davis, did. An undeserving person can't get in because 60% of the vote is such a high threshold, but I was very surprised at CIMA getting in. I didn't see that coming. He's never been close before. I think that what happened was Shingo Takagi was a very strong candidate. He really was. I mean, great wrestler who's been on top in New Japan and Dragon Gate for years. And I think people probably that voted for Shingo Takagi said, you know what? When he was in Dragon Gate, CIMA was probably the bigger star than Shingo Takagi, even though Shingo was the better wrestler. So it's like, why don't we vote him? And, with because I saw so many ballots that were Shingo Takagi and CIMA got in that way, stunned me. But Young Bucks, deserve to be in. There's people who didn't get in. I think Cody Rhodes deserves it, but he's also going to get in. Just, will it be next year, the year after? Punk's obviously, I think, going to get in soon enough. I think he has to be in. Orndorff, good pick. I voted for Orndorff, so I think that's a strong pick. And as far as others, there's all the Johnny Rougeau. Not a shock, because I knew a lot of people were going to vote for him, and I think in the Observer there's a big story by Pat LaPrade on Johnny Rougeau. And if you read the story, it's kind of like, this guy, and again, I know the background of Johnny Rougeau and Montreal wrestling. So to me, Johnny Rougeau, was a strong person to get in, but being based in Montreal and being mostly a Montreal star, it's very difficult for a regional star to get votes from all over the world. And it took him many, many years on the ballot before he got in. So I was glad he got in because I think that he's very deserving. So overall, I mean, I was happy with it. Dynamitas have always been the Dynamite Brothers in Mexico, always been right on the border. So I wasn't surprised that they got in. They've been close many, many years, and they just barely made it by what was it, 1 or 2 votes. So that was good. Johnny Saint, fantastic wrestler. So no qualms there.
Okay, a name I've heard come up on a couple of shows that have gone through the list here that people are kind of scratching their head at. Junkyard Dog.
He did very, very well. But I mean, like for me, number one, not a great wrestler. Very over for several years, and I always look at him, in a key way. Is like, this guy wasn't the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. Does he get in? And the answer is definitely no. He's famous, but he could have been the number 2 babyface behind Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
but he wasn't. He didn't. It's the whatever drug problems, whatever it was. It didn't happen. Guys who were big stars for 5 years and then flamed out for drug problems, those guys really they don't get into most sports Hall of Fames. He'll probably get in time, just because in that category that he's in, there's nobody strong left. I mean, him and maybe Ole. And Ole's a borderline. He could get in or not get in. I consider Ole a stronger candidate than JYD. Ole had great longevity, for a long time, and never a peak as a star like JYD's peak, but just more longevity, and also he was a more influential person and everything like that. So whatever. But I just. There's a lot of movement for JYD to get in, and I expect that he'll probably get the votes next year. But I won't be one of the people voting for him. I watched his whole career, and live, and just felt not enough longevity. It's just like the Von Erichs, and I love, look, I love the Von Erichs, but not enough longevity. I mean, David was died at 24, and that's you could go and see Sympathy. Well, if he didn't die, what would he have been? And it's like, yeah, he probably would have been a Hall of Famer, but he did. And if Kerry hadn't had the accident, would he have been in? Maybe, good chance, but he did. Kevin, if it was a longer term thing, I would have a very different viewpoint in all those cases. But I think that things have romanticized those few years to where people are voting on 2-3 year run, for the Von Erichs, and JYD maybe for 4-year run, and they were a great 4-year run, but it's like, that's not the whole career. And so that's my thoughts on them. Von Erichs might get in too. The movie helped them a lot.
Well, and you know what? That's the thing. We got to, again, preface this that's your opinions on these guys and girls, but you don't always get the final say because, like you said, they get voted in, and that's the way the panel goes. Dave, it's always great getting your insight after the list has been announced because I think people are genuinely craving that. And I know you give your write-ups on what you think for each person that goes in and some people that don't. And so people can definitely check that out in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. We will touch base more on some of the things you've been keeping tabs on, obviously, next week here. We are plumb out of time, but I want to thank you as always, sir, and we will catch you again next week.
Okay, great. Have a great week.
This is McGuire on Wrestling. If you like McGuire on Wrestling, you need to subscribe to the free McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed. Not only do you get access to the show a day early, but you also get free bonus content every week. Share a laugh with Mitch and Dimitri on the alternate commentary table.
Oh, I'm Cody Brown. Look at me.
Now, if this was Damian Priest, he'd apologize.
He probably would have apologized.
Follow along with the film career of one of wrestling's biggest stars with We've Seen a Movie.
Basically, I'm just watching John Cena play his wrestling character.
If John Cena was a raging alcoholic Atlantic City mooch before this.
Get all these shows, exclusive interviews, and more for free by subscribing to McGuire on Wrestling, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay, boo, it's lots of fun to do. If you like it, holla yay. If you don't, you holla boo.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, as we like to do the night after major pay-per-views, as we are doing today from AEW's Full Gear, it's another edition of Yay Boo, including some of your feedback. And here to join me throughout the show, Mr. Joe Aguinaldo. Hey, buddy.
Yay!
You know what I can tell you right now? Minus 16 and 2 feet of snow in Edmonton. Boo. Yeah, driving through that yesterday. And don't get me wrong, I lived in Edmonton. I still consider it my hometown. It's been a minute since I drove through an actual Edmonton snowstorm, though. Memories.
Wow.
Speaking of memories, as I was waiting for you to come on the show this morning, you know how you muck around on your Instagram reels and stuff will come up and usually some great moments from the past. Do you remember Starrcade? I think it was Starrcade when Dusty Rhodes came to the ring to Purple Rain.
I do not, actually.
You got to look that up. It's amazing. It's amazing. You know, we say, well, they didn't really do sports entertainment back in the day. And it's not like a huge production or nothing, but, you know, the arena's all purple. There's a bunch of smoke. He comes to the ring charging down the aisle in a purple robe. And it's funny, he made Purple Rain one of the most chill, awesome, great songs ever. Kind of this cool entrance.
Nice. Well, I mean, you know what? Like, talking about that real quick, the Freebirds used to come into Freebirds, right? And I think for a while before, you know, this is obviously before all the, you know, licensing and stuff. I think the Rock and Roll Express used to come into Jump or something like that. So, you know, guys were using songs back in the day.
I just thought Purple Rain was such a wild choice, though.
That is actually very cool. That is very cool.
Let's get on to AEW Full Gear here. We're going to go match by match, but we're going to go pretty quick here because otherwise this segment will be 9 hours long because the show, if you include the 0 hour and a half, was 5.5 hours long. So our opening match in the 0 hour was Anna Jay taking on Deonna Purrazzo. First of all, nice to see Deonna Purrazzo anywhere. You know, I don't watch a lot of the Ring of Honor, unfortunately, so I don't see her there if she is there. And then Anna Jay doing her thing. But Anna Jay took this one.
Yeah, like I'll admit, I did not watch the 0 hour because I have a life.
That's right.
But I am looking at the comments on the Facebook page, and Craig Usher, I believe his name is, he said it was a big yay. He liked the matches for all of the 0 hour, whereas Kyle Jago was like, he liked the Buddy Matthews match, wasn't too into the Anna Jay match, but mainly because of her lack of urgency, and he absolutely did not like the Rizzler stuff.
Which is in the minority, apparently. Let's skip ahead to this. So quickly, Dante Martin Commander versus the Beast Mortos and Buddy Matthews. Buddy Matthews gets the win there. But yeah, let's talk about really the match of the 0 hour here. And I couldn't believe and this just shows, you know, as much sometimes maybe it's a Canadian thing and our sensibilities aren't always in tune with what American social media and certain markets are really all about. But this Big Boom AJ guy who has ties to the New Jersey independent wrestling scene, this guy was over like Grover. And
Grover, dude.
We have seen this stuff before. There are some great Canadian wrestlers who show up on the AEW tapings back when they did the dark tapings, especially. And when I came to Ontario or when I was in Manitoba or for the Alberta shows, or, I've been everywhere with AEW basically across our country here. When you see your local stars doing something, the crowd really reacts. And that's what we got with QT Marshall and Big Boom AJ. Was this match a 7-star out of the park classic? Dear heavens, no. But I'm hard to find a match that had more energy from the crowd throughout the entire night. And I put a comment up on our Team MOW McGuire and Wrestling Facebook page, and Jake from Chicago, he agrees. He was at a viewing party. He said that match got the biggest reaction from the people at this viewing party. Wow. Other comments coming in saying that, yeah, that was the match. Really? That was the match to watch? And that's just it. You just never know what's going to resonate with folks. And so as much as people were kind of laughing at this, because why wouldn't you, when AEW announces that, oh yeah, the Costco guys, and that's what they're known for. They're known for reviewing Costco food. They get a match and it goes over like gangbusters. So if it works, it works. And in this case, it worked. Mike says initial pop, however, it also include a Monet Statlander. Yeah, that match was actually pretty solid. We'll get down there. I don't know if I agree with this, though. He says crowd was pretty hot all night for everyone. I disagree. Maybe for entrances. But there was a lot of quiet moments in this show. So we'll get through it as we go here. But yeah, for what it was, I mean, this damn Rizzler kid pointing at his face, 30, 40 times within a match was a little much, but I mean, hey, that's what he does. So I guess that's what we do. But anyway, overall feedback seems to be okay. Well, that was good for what it was. Of course, a Big Boom AJ getting the win. All right. We have Mercedes Moné with Camille. And of course, the showdown here, we're seeing some friction build between Monet and Camille, and then we get on with the show. So our first match of AEW Full Gear, Private Party versus the Outrunners versus Kings of the Black Throne versus the Acclaimed. The Outrunners, again, over. Is it a novelty act? I think so. Again, are they the best wrestlers in the world? Probably not, but they were in there with 3 teams who knew what they were doing, and overall, I thought it was pretty good. What do you got for feedback on the tag match here?
It looks like it was a yay. Everyone liked the matches. They liked all 4 teams. Personally, I'm going to give this one a boo, though. Now, I'm not a fan of the multiple team matches for a title or multiple people matches for a title, so that's why I'm giving it a boo. But I am happy that Private Party won.
One of the big pops tonight here, and I thought this was a pretty solid match overall, MJF versus Roddy Strong. And we see MJF, of course, pick up the win here. For a guy that hasn't been on TV live in 2 months, dude comes out, fantastic entrance. People are all over him. His energy was hot. I thought he was perfect in that role. I did find it surprising that Adam Cole wasn't weaseled into this match somehow, so it's making me wonder where he's sitting on the injury spectrum or what. But Adam Cole's theme hits, and he does come out with the Kingdom, but MJF takes off after the win. Overall, the match, I give it a yay. It was a fine match.
I was having a hard time getting actually into the match. You're right. It was a fine match, and I'm going to give it a boo. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, but they just didn't do anything for me, even though I like both guys.
I'm just seeing a comment come in on our Facebook page under the Big Boom AJ match here from our buddy Dave Drashiff. He's thinking that the audio is not catching the crowd right. And that might be the case. Okay. Like, it might be a case of miking things, but there were strong reactions where it seemed like the crowd was being picked up just fine. And I used that Big Boom match as the bar. Okay, this is a really hot moment for the crowd. Are they going to sound like this for the rest of the night? And it was hard pressed to find, minus pops for entrances. But when Big Boom AJ hits standard power slam, they were acting like it was Hogan slamming Andre. I don't know if it's a mic problem. He also brings up a camera problem. He says that the AEW lighting seems to be turning everybody's spray tan into a jaundice look, which I agree. Anyway, let's get on with the card here. The TBS Championship is up.
Hold on, before we go any further. Sorry, yes. I got to give a shout out to Tips McGee about that MJF Roddy Strong match. He said it was serviceable, and it's like, yes, I'm okay with that. There it is.
The Aguinaldo serviceable, rising up again. All right, the TBS Championship, Mercedes Moné against Chris Statlander, tore up the house. I expected nothing less. Mercedes, a lot of people are saying, had her best match in AEW last night. I agree. I think she was the most convincing she's been in a while. And I think that Chris Statlander is the perfect opponent to bring that out. I've been a Stat fan for the longest time here, ever since I first saw her show up in AEW. I'm glad she's ditched a lot of the cutesiness with the alien boop thing and everything, and she's just become a serious contender here and a serious competitor. Mercedes best match and a solid match, but Mercedes money, still your TBS champion. Thoughts?
100%. Actually, I'm going to go to feedback on the board. Everyone who commented on this gave this a yay. Kyle Jago actually agrees that this is probably Monet's best AEW match so far. I love me some Chris Statlander, much like you do. This match I thought was really good. 100% give this a yay. And I will even give biting the knee to escape a pile driver a huge shout out. When Stat was doing the pile driver, and then it's like, is Monet biting her? And I'm like, that is awesome.
Desperation.
That was amazing. So absolutely a yay for me.
Hangman Adam Page versus Jay White. Jay White takes the win on this one here. Don't get me wrong, I like crazy Adam Page more than I like whiny Adam Page, so that's fine. Jay White takes the win here. Feedback from the page, Joe?
It's 50-50. Dave, for example, said boo. It was a weak build. He's not digging the Hangman character, whereas Craig Usher said, yay, both men were great characters and this was enjoyable. You know, I like both guys, but it just didn't hit for me. And I think it was because of the build, and B, the believability of both guys, and specifically Hangman Page.
All right, we get to our next match here, and this is the one I was looking forward to as far as to see what these guys could do together. Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. This build has actually been done pretty well, minus some very long, drawn-out promos and maybe a little bit too much chatter here. Nevertheless, Will Ospreay coming out with his shoulder kind of resembling you're trying to hold a car door on with duct tape. That's kind of how Ospreay's shoulder looked a little bit to me. Obviously, the crowd all over this one, loving Ospreay, but a clean pin on Will Ospreay for Kyle Fletcher. Your thoughts, and then we'll go to the board.
I like it. I thought this was this along with the Statlander Monet match were the two matches that I enjoyed the most. Both guys brought it. The only thing that I miss is the Simple Jack haircut.
Shout out to the ACT on that one. We did not get what we thought we were going to get when it came to the champagne celebration with Mina Shirakawa and the glamour Mariah May.
That said, though, people who commented, all of them said yay.
We were all expecting Toni Storm, and there was no Toni Storm. Anyway, let's go to a match that really, really stood out as well. I found this one quite entertaining, which says a lot because it was Jack Perry against Daniel Garcia, and I had this match as kind of a really going into it, and Jack Perry is just such a perfect little D-bag, and Daniel Garcia, I think, actually elevated himself here, not just because he is the winner and new TNT champion, but I think Garcia really stood up in a spot he needed to be here. Feedback from the board on this one.
Very similar. Dave Drasher said that Jack Perry is really great at being a little jerk. Yep. I'll paraphrase there, that you want to see him get punched. It was a big yay for him. And Craig Usher also said yay. He says that Jack Perry continues to show why he's the best in wrestling today. Now, I don't know if I'll agree with that, but he is a very good heel. I'll give you that. So.
Well, and I love the sharpshooter. I love that lean back. Like I'm gonna break you in half doing the sharpshooter here, and gets the tap. And Matt Menard on commentary. I know people are kind of 50-50 on.
Oh, he was Magic, great. No. There can be no 50-50. No, he was awesome. And to borrow a line from the ACT guys, it's like, are you in my notes? Because I said the exact same thing about this match. This was going to be my bathroom break. And as I'm watching the match, I'm like, no, I'm enjoying this. And then I got really into it at the end. And then when, Daniel Garcia won, I thought, wow, that was pretty good.
Favorite match of the night for me, I'll just go ahead and say now, I thought everything, almost everything right happened. And there's one little critique I have about this. But again, this is just me being picky wrestling fan, not saying I know anything about how to put the match together. But for the AEW International Championship, Konosuke Takeshita versus Ricochet, Takeshita retains the title after an absolutely dominant performance for the most part against Ricochet. And where I had a problem with this match is how much damage was, depicted to Ricochet's lower back especially. and for him to still be able to springboard up the ropes and all this stuff after that happened. And then he starts selling the back afterwards. Like, okay, you can say, well, adrenaline boost, whatever. But I mean, honestly, if my only critique about this, because those spots happened, is that made the match go too long. I thought, if anything, they should have just kept this as a dominant performance from Takeshita on Ricochet. And I know what you're saying. Well, that'll hurt Ricochet. In one match, it will. But, guys, we can have another match between these guys where Ricochet learns. He's like, okay, I got to get in there. I got to try different offense, all this other stuff. Not every match needs to have big comebacks for a hope spot. And they did that with this, and that's what really kind of stood out as a little distracting for me. But overall, Takeshita is just a freaking monster.
I was kind of hoping that Takeshita would get that quick win, so to speak, because that was actually one of the things throughout the card that everyone was getting a hope spot kind of thing.
Yeah.
So guys, you don't all need to kick out at 2 3/4. It's okay to lose, like, a short match. And, as you were saying, Brock Lesnar versus John Cena, when Lesnar took Cena to Suplex City for 16 minutes and that was it, or whatever it was, right? That didn't seem to hurt Cena. Like, you know?
And that's the thing. We all get hung up on individual matches. And I know Mitch likes to quote a time that I was on their show in Calgary with them and talked about how Swerve lost a match or something. I said, Swerve can lose a match. It'll be fine. He can lose 10 matches. You can build a guy in nothing flat. And I go back to last week's guest with Raj Desi. Look at what they did with Jinder Mahal. He went from being literally a 0 to WWE champion within a matter of like 3 months. Like, it was crazy. So, all right, next up. Was looking forward to seeing this because, I got a personal investment in it in MVP, but the Hurt Syndicate with Bobby Lashley taking on Swerve Strickland. Of course, it was Bobby one-on-one, but they really had the Hurt Syndicate doing the heel maneuvers here. We even saw, ejections happen due to grabbing of feet and whatnot. Overall, the Almighty gets his first big win in AEW against Swerve Strickland. And again, like I said, Swerve can lose. And then they beat up Prince Nana, which is good because now they're ultra heels, and that's what they want to be. So that's what they're going to be. But feedback on that match.
People that commented, everyone said yay. Dave Drashev said he hated that Swerve lost, but he said that it was an awesome match. I 100% agree. I thought this was a good way to bring Lashley in. And again, to your point, like, he looked like a beast. So total yay for me on this one.
And our last match from AEW Full Gear here, it was Jon Moxley, your AEW champion, allegedly. Where is the belt? We don't know. Taking on Orange Cassidy. This match actually almost had me sold for a little bit on Orange Cassidy being in this main event. And then something happened. So Orange Cassidy starts out on a fierce attack, gets the jump start in the introductions. And he's ground and pounding on Moxley, and it's looking like he hit him with like 3 or 4 orange punches, which, again, if you're hitting him with 3 of your finishers and not pinning, that tells me how effective your finisher is. So then that, again, goes to, is Orange Cassidy that guy?
Yeah.
He's not that guy. They had a great exchange of violence outside the ring, especially. Cassidy hits the steps at one point, gets some color, gets cut open. And then we get back into the ring. Eventually, there's all sorts of shenanigans. We see run-ins galore. Yuta. Wheeler Yuta ends up. Although, just wait. Wheeler Yuta. That's not what bothered me. What bothered me is we're in this heat, intense match. The dirty heels are being dirty heels. Orange Cassidy is trying to be the hero for AEW. And then the hands go in the pockets. And the kicks come in, right? The little dainty kicks. I get that's his gimmick. But this is Jon Moxley. This is the AEW Championship. This is this new, serious Orange Cassidy. And you're doing your fancy little pocket kicks. Dude, time and place. And this was neither the time nor the place. And that actually told me exactly what was going to happen for the rest of the match.
I can't argue. Like, I have been a pretty big supporter of Orange Cassidy.
Me too.
But
I love a lot of the gimmick, but just not in this match.
Yeah, like 100%. Like when he did the pocket thing, Like, you know what? It's like, I know he was going to get a pop for it, but it's like, it's not the time, it's not the place, and not against this particular guy.
No.
Right? That said, I got to tell you, this match for me was a complete miss. And I think it's because as good as they tried, at no point did I think Mox was going to lose. And yeah, like to your point, the pocket thing really didn't help that. But the other side of that coin too was like, all right, we're waiting for the rest of the BCC or whatever they're called now to come in, and like this
Death Riders,
almost
the Death Riders. We got
the Death Riders. Yeah,
we'll give the respect to the name, absolutely. But yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
But this is now becoming a bloodline thing, which I absolutely despised. Right? It's like, no, seriously, like Moxley is now the new Roman. He comes in, fights, gets in trouble. These guys bail him out. Shenanigans, wins the belt. Hey guys, Bloodline did that like for 2 years. Let's move on, please. So, all right, 100% boo for me on this one.
Feedback from the board?
People that commented liked it. They said that it was. People said it was way too early for Mox to drop the belt.
Well, obviously, but
and actually, like they enjoyed the pop that Willow got for Marina, which I thought was amazing. And yes, another person said the Mox story continues to intrigue.
Fair enough. Well, there you have it. Some of the Yay-Boo feedback. Thanks to you. And keep the comments coming on the Team MOW Maguire on Wrestling Facebook page. If you're listening to the radio version of this and you missed some of the matches being reviewed, that's because we had to condense the show for time. But if you're listening on podcast, you got the whole card there. MaguireShow.com is where you download that and you can hear it every week. Joe Aguinaldo out in Ontario, thank you very much for being a part of Yay-Boo. And coming up next, Dan Van Alst. Belts by Dan. Belt Fan Dan. He's made some of the coolest titles for some of the biggest companies out there, and we're going to talk to him all about championship belts, history, lineage, how they're made, and if you're looking to get one, how not to get scammed. That's on the way.
Maguire on Wrestling, online and on the radio. Listen to the show Mondays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at ckxu.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and at maguireshow.com.
CKXU-FM 88.3 in Lethbridge is Southern Alberta's true alternative radio station.
The cream of the crop! Nobody does it better.
Proudly carrying Maguire on Wrestling every week.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something different to listen to,
this is gonna be a slobber knocker!
Check out our NCRA award-winning lineup of programs or stream us anytime at ckxu.com.
Welcome back to Maguire on Wrestling.
If you are a wrestling fan, no matter what age, no matter what era, one of the most mystical items, one of the greatest sought items by many fans is even the opportunity to just hold an actual championship belt. Nowadays, replicas run rampant. My studio office here is full of them, but the guy we're about to talk to has a bunch of very real, very legitimate ones that not only has he collected and obtained throughout the years, but in fact, he's designed for some of the biggest companies out there and some of the biggest wrestlers out there. He's known as Belt Fan Dan, or Belts by Dan. Dan Van Alst, pleasure to finally talk to you, sir.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me, Mike. It's finally good to meet you. And face to face.
Yeah, for those that can't see your office and your backdrop here, I mean, I'm seeing every title I've grown up loving and many more here. Yeah. And are all those ones behind you 100% legit?
Yeah, this is the slimmed down version. I had too many at one point, so I had to consolidate. It wasn't about what you wanted. It was about what you really meant to you, like what you grew up with as a kid, which belts had a special place in your mind. So that's kind of how I kind of narrowed it down. Can't see it, but the whole room is these shelves. So over here I have some of the MMA belts, and then ECW. I have some ROH up there, WWF, some UFC, New Japan, NWA, and then down there I have some WCW and all the prototypes of the AEW belts that I helped for their replicas.
Yeah. So, and this is, man, your list is so impressive. If you're not following Belts by Dan or Belt Fan Dan, find his social media, because I'll tell you right now, it's every day is a surprise. You're always posting something incredible that either you've obtained or
more importantly, as of recent, you've designed and developed. And I mean, take us through AEW alone. I mean, how many of those belts in the company where more belts is better have you actually designed and made for AEW alone?
Well, I'm primarily a belt maker, and a lot of the times when something like a company like that has a specific idea, I will bring in other designers. I'm not going to try to take on something I know I'm not really as qualified as can do. So like a company like AEW, I'll consult with several different artists and we'll all brainstorm together based on what they provide and come out with an example to present them. So a good example is the Owen Hart Memorial belts. And I already had a copy of the Stampede Wrestling belt, which is based off of, and they really like that design. So it was just a matter of fitting the theme for Owen and the tournament. So you go back and forth with some designers, some artists, put it all together, and then give the client a full color render of what they're seeing. And you just take it from there. Most of the time it's little tweaks back and forth. And despite what you might see in the picture, the final product, there's no way to kind of like really show somebody this is how it's going to look finalized.
Right.
So pretty much just listening to what they have to say and what they want and then going from there, because they're the clients, they're the ones paying for it. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I think would look better or what they do there. I'm just pretty much there to offer suggestions and to make what's in their head into a real physical belt.
Well, it's so stunning to see how that process goes. And I was going to ask you about that, if other artists are a part of that. And those belts in particular, if you don't know, I do the commentary for Dungeon Wrestling. We've talked about this on Facebook and stuff before. And so I've seen Brett's actual belts from Stampede back in the day. I think I sent you pictures of the British Commonwealth Mid-Heavyweight Championship that he just has, and he brought it in for one day. And, seeing some of these old belts and how a lot of time back in the day, championship titles, I mean, there wasn't really a strategy for it. It was kind of hodgepodged, and people did what they could to come up with plating and figured out what would make the best strap for it. How has that business evolved overall? And is there kind of a standardized process now for those that do it?
I think there is. I think Reggie Parks in the 70s, just revolutionized the industry. For those who don't know, Reggie was a wrestler, and there were some issues with the belts they had. And I believe working AWA, he offered to make them a pair of tags because he knew a little bit about leather, a little bit about metal. And I think his business just took off from there. So I think every one of the modern day belt makers will tell you the impact and the influence that Reggie Parks did have on them being either interested in belts or wanting to actually recreate them. And most people try to replicate the Reggie style with their snap boxes and their tooling style. And I think once most of the leather crafters and the belt makers get that down, then they start exploring what else they can do. Because there's not a lot you can do with the plates that's kind of outside your wheelhouse, but with the leather, that's where the person or the belt maker can actually put some of their own creativity and workmanship into it to set themselves apart from other people.
I was just unpacking from a move recently, and I found my old CD-ROMs of my radio school interviews that I did. My first wrestling radio interview was actually Reggie Parks, and became a friend through the years after that. So for those that don't know Reggie Parks, I mean, the easiest two to lay claim to right away are the WWF 80s, 90s Winged Eagle and Intercontinental Championships. Those are the ones that were kind of his landmark belts, and I see them right over your head, and I want to run through the screen right now and just hold them, because even getting to hold one of Brett's copies of an actual Reggie belt, I mean, it was just unreal. The craftsmanship, the detail, and like you said, Reggie kind of standardized the entire industry for everyone here. When you talk about adding your own designs and things, a belt you recently also helped craft was the Champion's Grail that was revealed in Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling's debut. Good friend of the show, Rohan Raja, was the first champion for that iteration of the Champions Grail here, which combined legacies of two different champions and put it together. When you get handed a job like that and saying, okay, Scott D'Amore is a huge traditionalist when it comes to wrestling and lineage and titles like that, and they want to make something big for this title that is eventually going to be defended around the world. And it was funny, I was talking to Rohan at our Dungeon Wrestling show, and I said, so you said Japan. I mean, what do you mean? And he's like, I can't say yet, but soon we will know where it's going to be. I mean, this is a heavy task. You're creating, in what some cases can be a legacy for a company.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So where do you check the ego and say, okay, you know what? This has got to be the best it can be no matter what, because this is going to be the first.
Right. There wasn't pressure on me on that belt. And I know it's kind of weird to say, but like when New Japan asked me to do the V5, like I immediately knew that no matter what I did would not be liked, because you're replacing one of the most commonly loved belts of all time. So there was a lot of nerves and second guessing every single step. With the Champions Grail, they didn't tell me what it was being used for. So there was no pressure compared to saying, all right, this is going to be on TV in X amount of days, like you can't screw up. I was lucky enough, most of the time these companies come to me and there's a very tight deadline and I have to put everything that I have going on to the side and solely focus on their belt. But the Champions Grail, we were working on that for over a year. So I think we did have close to like 16 different iterations of the artwork and going back and forth and checking every detail and like, how would it look this way? How would it look that way? It was very laid back, which I think helped in a sense where I could work with the belt at different stages and then shoot back to them and say, hey, instead of doing it like this, what if I do this? What if I add this color paint? What if we go with this type of design? Mm-hmm. And it's a back and forth give and take. And when you have people with different creative backgrounds all working together on a belt like that and giving enough time to go through the steps, I think you will get a product like the final belt of the Champions Grail, which has a lot of hidden details in it, a lot of hidden meanings in it to people who worked on the belt, people behind the scenes of the belt, and the tradition and legacy of the two titles that came to, I guess, this came to represent.
I got to hold that one. I got to really take a look at it. The leather work, the words that are inscribed. I kind of want to save it as a little feature find Easter egg for fans that haven't seen it yet. And I know you're kind of the same way. You like to just slowly reveal sometimes components of belts that you're making and working on here. When it comes to those little Easter eggs and those little details, has there ever been a time where you've made a belt for maybe people we've seen? You were talking about the V5 here with New Japan or other titles here, where it's something that you kind of snuck in for yourself in there?
There are some belts that I write notes on the back of the leather before I put the backing on.
Oh.
So depending on like what I know the company is for. So like I've done several belts for the New York Yankees, and there was an instance where after Aaron Judge hit his record-breaking home run in Texas, they lost the belt for a little bit. So like during the celebration in the locker room, where'd the belt go? So like I'm checking eBay, I'm checking Craigslist, I'm checking Facebook Marketplace, thinking it's going to pop up there. And, they eventually found it. It was misplaced, but panic set in. I get a call the next day. They lost the belt. They need another belt. Rush, and this was that was the last game of that season, and they were heading into the playoffs. And one of the Yankees' big rivalries is Houston Astros. Mm-hmm. So the belt that replaced it, that Rush belt, I put a big long note, congratulating Aaron Judge and talking about that team that year and what they needed to do to the Astros. But we won't talk about the fact that they lost the series to the Astros, but it's an Easter egg on the belt. So like someday if the belt gets damaged or if, my leather stinks and they want somebody else to replace it, whoever has the chance to take the backing off that belt will just get an interesting, little Easter egg.
That's fantastic. That's like when you're doing renovations around your house. I joke about this all the time. Anytime I've done
where
renovations.
it came from.
Yeah. Anytime I've done rentals at a house, I've always screwed a WWE action figure somewhere to the inside of the truss. So if you take a wall down, you're going to find a Brock Lesnar or a, Sami Zayn or something attached to the house. So that's fantastic. You mentioned Craigslist, eBay, things like that. One of the things I've really admired about you and your approach to belts is, I'm not saying you're policing the industry, because I think that's too strong of a term, but I think that fans that want authenticity or can sometimes fall for an offer that's too good to be true, you do a good job of kind of giving people the heads up, like, I wouldn't order from this, or here's the history of what's going on from this place. And bootleg belts are also a big thing these days that fans are encountering from ordering online specifically. And I mean, when you're advising fans, I guess, people want to believe that what they're getting is real. So what made you decide, hey, you know what, somebody's got to speak up for this and say, this isn't always legit?
It's probably one of the biggest reasons people either like me or hate me. And, someone's like, well, who are you to be the belt police? It's like, well, I've been doing this 20 something years. I've seen people come and go as not only belt makers, but I've seen legitimate belt makers turn into scam artists. There's a lot of people out there who want copies of belts, and there's not a lot of legitimate ways to acquire those belts, especially at lower price points.
Right.
So when you have people just begging you to take their money for a copy of it, it's very easy to get in over your head. It's very easy to, just give up and keep the money and spend it on stupid stuff, and then not be able to have the funds to actually make a belt or provide the service that you promised these people. So I think, especially now with the newer generation, they want everything instantly, instant gratuity. So they go on Amazon and they see a belt for $200. It's like, well, why am I paying $400 on WWE Shop when I can get it for $200 on Amazon?
Right.
You got people on Amazon using pictures of the WWE belt and then sending them horrible knockoff copies. So there are different people in the community that keep track of, like, who are the resellers that have legitimate relationships with WWE Shop or the replica companies and then offer you these belts. And then there's other people who are just outright fraudulent, who will purchase belts made overseas in bulk and then claim that they made them, double up the price, and make their business that way. So the belt community as a whole used to be a small group on Yahoo groups and then forums, and then eventually, Facebook exploded. So now you can't keep the cat out of the bag. Everybody can get a bootleg. Everybody knows where to get them. Everyone has a maker of their choice. But what I try to do is I try to educate people, and I try to help the collectors that want to go about collecting in the right way, where you're purchasing a legalized copy that helps support some of these smaller companies or help support a belt maker. Because, to be honest, there's no money in making belts. All right, I make belts for these companies on TV, but I'm not getting paid a ton of money. Like, there's a lot of rush, there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with doing it, and you do it for the notoriety with the hopes that you can acquire other big name clients. But most of us, we don't get copies of the replicas. We don't get percentages on sales. We don't get any type of royalties anymore. So, like, if I make a belt on TV and then AEW offers a copy of it, that's great because I help with that. But then when you go and buy it on Amazon from somebody overseas, you're taking away the money from the company that we helped put our time and effort in and to offer those replicas. And then when it happens over and over again, where everybody's buying these bootleg copies of belts, like, what is my incentive as a creative person or as an artist? Why am I going to waste my time doing this? Whereas I'm only going to get paid for making that one copy, but somebody overseas is going to make 500 mass-produced copies and make more money than I ever did on it. Yeah. And, it's not to be greedy. It's not to sound like, oh, I'm all about the money, but theft is theft. And if you put your heart, any artist knows that when you put your heart and soul into it, whether it be artwork, music, film, like, the artists should be recognized for their work, and they're entitled to something from their works. And to just outright go and rip it off and steal it with a bootleg copy because you feel entitled to owning something that you saw on TV just really leaves a sour taste in my mouth. So for the people who want to go about it the right way, there's resources available to acquire the belts you want. It might not be at a price point that you're comfortable with, but that just adds to the fun and the chase where it's, if you could just click a button and get everything you wanted, the joy in your brain only lasts for a few seconds. When you have to work hard and save and make plans and then wait, and then that belt finally comes in the mail, when you've done all of the legwork to finally get it, when you finally open your eyes and you hold the belt in your hand, it's going to mean a lot more to you. And every time you look over your shoulder on the shelf and you see it, it means that much more. It's not just a throwaway.
I've used this example before. I've talked about it. I went down to Mexico one year, and it was for a radio station trip, and my goal was to get to either CML or AAA, and the closest show was AAA, and it was like 800 kilometers away, so there's no way it was going to happen on that trip. But I ended up finding like just this local indie guy who was working as one of those guys selling the knockoff masks at the resort, right? And so I started asking for them by name, which a lot of Canadians that come down to Mexico to drink their faces off and party and whoop it up aren't usually asking for the traditional names. They're looking for their, CFL or NHL favorite team embroidered onto a Rey Mysterio mask or whatever, right? Yep. And so when I'm asking for the legends, they're like, "Oh, you actually know what you're talking about a bit." It's like, "Oh, you got to meet Javier." And Javier is this little tea kettle guy that comes out, and turns out he ran like the local indie fed and had guys that, his biggest claim to fame was working with El Dandy, which as a Bret Hart fan always makes me laugh because, who are you to doubt El Dandy? But the cool thing about it was we end up lining up a show on the beach, and at the end of it, and this is after I've already bought, 10 different cheap mass-produced masks. He gave me his actual mask, and I've got pictures of him from like 15 years prior wearing this mask, in these mask versus mask and all these horrible matches that they do in Mexico. And I tell you, that thing means more to me than any of this other crap that I've bought. And so I understand what you're saying because of the authenticity, and people love that sort of thing. I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but we are going to have you back on because I'd love to talk more about belts with you down the line here.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to that desire for authenticity and that desire for something, I agree with you 100% that people need to get a better appreciation for that, because there are guys and girls that'll buy replicas from WWE shop and they'll cosplay as their favorite wrestler, and wouldn't you know it, a $600-700 belt that you can buy now, they're tossing around like nothing because, like you said, it loses that special feeling. Meanwhile, this dingy, torn-up mask that I have in a special box. It's tucked away, somewhere special, and I can only imagine that being the same. I've expressed to you before how through the friendship with Reg through the years, we won't get into the semantics of why it never happened, but I'm sure you know why it didn't happen. He always told me, "Yeah, we'll get you a winged eagle. We'll get one for you." And then it didn't happen, and he passed. And so it was funny. I was talking to Brett about it, and getting to hold his belt there was like, okay, I finally got to hold Reg's actual work in my hand. You know what I mean? It's not mine. It's there. If I ever get the chance to own one, it'll be the same thing, but it's something I'm willing to prepare the investment for, like you said. So I guess if you want to consider yourself a collector for the sake of having the most, that's one thing. But the safest way, I guess, for fans that are looking to get their hands on the actual real deal. I mean, you have belts that have been, sold to you and you resell, or given to you that you resell, and you say flat out, "Look, these are boots. I'm not saying they're great. This is what they are. This is, the family had them for some reason, wanted to get rid of them." But then you, every once in a while, you get your hands on some of those authentic TV used. I haven't seen you post a Reg one in a while, but I saw, it's funny, you were talking about no royalties and copyrights and things like that. You can't get a legitimate new winged eagle belt made with a WWF logo on it, period. That's never going to happen again, legally, right?
Right. And with Reggie's passing as well, that's really why the market has skyrocketed for anything made by Reggie, anything WWF logo, anything ring used. Like 10 years ago, you can buy a ring used WWE belt for under $5,000. Mm-hmm. Now you're not getting into a ring used TV belt for under $10,000 for the most part. So there is a high demand, there is a low quantity, and the people who own them are setting the price. And, it's tough. I understand, but at the same time, once you actually save up and get it, it's going to mean that much more to you at the end of the day.
Dan Van Alst, Belts by Dan, Belt Fan Dan. Find him on all the socials. So much more I want to dive into with you. So let's do this again down the road here. But I wanted to have you on, especially as we approach the holiday season. I think this is a good time for people who aren't familiar with you, especially because there are people out there that might want to say, hey, I want to get, my husband or my son or somebody, I want to get them a belt. So if I want a WWE belt for my kid, for example, I'm guessing you're going to tell me WWE Shop is probably the safest way to go there.
Definitely the safest, and I would say to keep an eye out when they do pay-per-views or whatever they call them now, when they do the PLEs, when they do Black Friday, there's always a coupon, but usually around the time of the event, they'll do a coupon code for the belts, and that's pretty much your best way to get a deal on a brand new belt. If you're looking for something that's pre-owned, something that's not made anymore, there's a lot of good resources on Facebook, on Twitter, on groups that sell the legitimate copies, authorized copies that are just pre-owned. So I would say the first thing to do is just don't get overwhelmed. Don't buy the first thing you see. Ask questions, ask plenty of questions, ask for references. If people can't answer your questions, if they can't give you references, just move on. There's plenty of stuff out there. And don't feel like you're going to be missing out on it if you don't immediately buy that copy right away.
There you go. Again, I can't recommend enough. Find Belt Fan Dan. Beltsbydan.com is where you can go. Leather by Dan also is another brand name you go under here. But following you for the last few years and communicating with you has been just a great educational experience for someone who respects the craft of belt making. Like I said, Reg was my first wrestling radio guest, and that was after years of wanting to meet the guy, and I'm happy to say I did, and I'm sad he's gone now. But you know what, Dan, I think you're doing a great job and I won't say policing, but I will say definitely defending the legacy of belt makers out there and doing some great work at the same time. My last question for you, the weight of the Champion's Grail title, was that a rib on whoever the champion is?
No, when people want stacked plates, that comes with it.
That's it. Beautiful belt, but insanely heavy.
Well, if you're going to be the champion, you gotta be able to carry the load, both in every aspect of the sense. So.
I'm just kidding, of course. A beautiful piece of work again. And Dan, thank you so much for making the time to talk with us today. Pleasure finally doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, got to do it again. I appreciate the time.
Well, there you have it again. If you're listening on the radio at CKXU or any of the other radio stations that carry this show, reminder, you can get an extended version this week, McGuire on Wrestling, McGuireShow.com, or just look up McGuire on Wrestling anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. We've got a lot more on our Yay Boo segment, some more with Dave Meltzer. If you want to support the show, McGuireShow.com, you can leave a tip there, and I always love your feedback. Find me on the socials at McGuire Show. Next week, going to talk more about an experience I had this past weekend, plus Juventud Guerrera, the WCW Cruiserweight legend, is going to be on the show. He just celebrated his 50th birthday this week, so we'll talk to him about that and a bunch more. Until then, as always, thank you for listening and letting me do what I do. Play safe, drive safe. Be seeing ya. Gotta go dig my car out of some snow now.
McGuire on Wrestling, online and on the radio. Listen to the show Mondays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at CKXU.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and at McGuireShow.com.